so much. What an awesome introduction. I got introduced by this guy one time. He said, we're so glad Don Piper's here. If he's as good as they say he is, let's get this started. If he isn't, let's get this over with. I think that's fair. That's very kind introduction. Thank you, Nicole, Pastor Randy, Cheryl. So many people have contributed to making this weekend wonderful, and it has been. I will not forget you, and God won't either. So thank you for all the hard work that went into making this happen. I'm delighted to be here. Who says you can't have church at 5 o'clock on Sunday? See, I like doing this kind of stuff because there are people passing down the street now who are looking over and saying, "Who died?" Yeah, because there's people at church at 5. I was thinking in Illinois in a town, and it was kind of like this. The churches had gotten together and decided to do this, and they had promoted it, and we were in the First Baptist Church that day. But there were people from many backgrounds and denominations like tonight, and we had a great crowd. It was a wonderful service, and there were those who were making reservations in heaven. And we got through, and I went out to sign books like I will after this, and the pastor of that church, although there were many pastors of other churches in the audience, said, "Can I get you anything?" And I said, "Yeah, I get some water would be good," before I started signing books. And I said, "Well, that was a great night, great audience." He said, "Yeah, we haven't had that many people in church since the mayor died." So I thought, okay, what does it take to get a crowd together in that town? The mayor has to die. It seemed a little dramatic for me. Well, I'm glad you're here, and I want you to look around for a moment or two at the other people that are here. Just kind of look around. You can do it. It's okay. Turn around, look behind you. Yeah. I don't know whether you like this or not, but this is what heaven looks like. There aren't any denominations in heaven. Amen. Nothing divides us. Everything unites us. So if you like what you see tonight, you're going to like heaven. And here's the good news. We're taking reservations tonight. We want to make sure that you're ready to go. It's a real place, and you can go there. I certainly found out the hard way. I died and went to heaven. A lot of weddings in this place, do you think? I mean, you can imagine over the years, this building's over 100 years old, how many people have gotten married in this room. And I'm sure there's some magnificent weddings that have been had in this room. This looks like a great place to have a wedding. And have you been to a wedding recently, anybody? No one? They have weddings in Pennsylvania, I know that. Yeah. Okay, well, you know how this works. The officiant, whoever's conducting the wedding, will come in and stand here and look very dignified. If you know them, you know they're not, but they're looking very dignified. And then the groom and the groomettes will come over to the side. They'll stand here and be facing out. They also look very dignified, but we know they're not. They're standing here looking down the aisle. Then there'll be some really nice music, and some very attractive girls wearing dresses they'll never wear again will come over here and stand here. They'll be facing out. Now you have all these people looking that way, even though you're looking this way. Then there'll be some especially fine music, and everyone will stand and turn that direction, and here comes the bride. My daughter has been married about 8 years now, and my accident was 25 years ago. And, I was a fatality in the accident. I can remember the day my daughter got married, as she's on my arm, and I'm bringing her forward to marry a guy who's not worthy of her. None of them are. Kind of laughing like that's funny. Hey, I want to talk about miracles a little bit later on. If you don't believe in miracles, consider this: that a son-in-law who's not worthy to marry your daughter could be the father of the most beautiful children. Is that a miracle or what? Yeah. Some of you guys are laughing, but your mother-in-law feels the same way. So here they all are, and there's a downbeat, and here comes the bride on the arm of her father. tell the difference between a bride and a groom, not just by the way they're dressed. When the groom walks in, everybody leans over and says, "Is that him?" And what happens when the bride walks in? Everyone stands up, they turn around, they look in her direction. She's been waiting for this all her life. And many people have come long distances just to see her dress. That's why they're here. And so she's coming down the aisle. Now, everyone's looking at her, which is the point of the ceremony. But no one is looking at her like the groom. This is his bride. His knees are knocking, and his hands are sweating, and he's excited. 40 years ago for me, when I stood down at the end of that aisle and watched my wife-to-be, Eva, come down, I'll remember it forever, of course. She was a vision of loveliness. And now, 40 years later, and 3 children and 2 grandchildren later, it remains one of the highlights of my life. With that in mind, listen to these words from the Revelation, number 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and the first heaven, the first earth was passed away, and there was no longer any sea. Now, the reason this says here in the Revelation that there's no sea in heaven is because what happens to seas on earth? What do? They divide us. Here on earth, if we want to cross the sea, we're going to have a method to do so. We have to fly over the sea, we have to sail over the sea, we have to do something to get to the other side of the sea. We have quite a few seas that are on earth, and they're quite large, so they really divide us. But in heaven, there's no sea because nothing divides us. There is water in heaven. I mean, we know there's a river of life that flows from the throne of God, but no sea. I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. Listen to this. Prepared as a bride, beautifully dressed for her husband. You ever read that before? I confess that I did. Probably quite a few times before I got killed by a big truck. But it takes on a different significance, like much of the Scripture does after you've gone through an enormously traumatic experience. A lot of the Scriptures just has a totally different meaning for me, or much more significance, let's put it that way. So now reading this, it tells me that I was not as excited about heaven as I should have been before I got killed. I wasn't thinking about it as much as I should have been. I'm not alone in this. I mean, statistics show that most people think they're going to heaven, but they don't think about it very much. Instead of having a wedding here, there's a body here in a casket. Then we're thinking about heaven because we're confronted with our mortality. We can't help thinking about it. We're thinking about ourselves and what happens when we die, and we're also thinking about her or him, the people that we're about to go to the cemetery with. Where are they now? The body's still here, but they're not. So what happens next? I think that's an awesome question. I think it's a relevant question. I think it's the question of the hour because, frankly, in my opinion, I do have some experience in the area. If you're not ready to go to heaven, you're not even ready to live here. On the way to heaven. I do believe that hell is just as real as heaven. If you don't want to go there, you know you don't. You don't have to. There is a better place prepared for people who are prepared for heaven. I found out the hard way. I got killed on the way to church. I was pastoring a church south of Houston, Texas, in a little town called Alvin. And I had been there for a couple of years. I went to a pastor's conference 130 miles away. And I woke up on a rainy, cold January morning, and I'm headed back to church. It's Wednesday, so I'm going to lead a Bible study in my church that night. That was the plan. We had services on Wednesday night in my church in addition to Sundays. And so here I am in my car on the way to church, 130 miles away. It was a very rural kind of retreat area, and I'm crossing an old bridge, and there it is. That's called the Trinity River Bridge. It is still there to this day, even though it's not in use anymore. where this little boat launch is off to the side, there's now a 4-lane highway. And the old bridge was built to honor veterans of World War I. That's old. And narrow, as you can see. I had been on the bridge that day because I took a different pathway home, and I'm crossing it from the opposite direction. And a truck is coming down this road from this direction. And he's going way too fast. And a car had pulled out in front of him from this boat launch, and he said he was going to hit the car. He knew he was, or he could go around the car and hope no one was coming. He cannot see down the bridge because at the angle that truck was going, the bridge is blocking his view. So he decides to go around that car, and he hit me head on. The truck literally ran over my car, crushed it, shoved it up against the railing of the bridge. It went off the back of my car and struck a couple of more cars, including the one he was trying to miss in the first place. So it's a 4-vehicle pileup on that bridge, and it's in the middle of nowhere. It took a long time for police and ambulances to arrive. They did. This is the front page of the newspaper the next day, and there are 4 ambulances there because there are 4 vehicles involved, and they're doing everything they could to try to save those people. Well, they didn't have to work very hard. The truck driver and the drivers of the other 2 cars were both uninjured. They were shaken up, as you might have imagined. They were in a car wreck, but they're okay. So something very extraordinary happened. 4 paramedics are working on the man in the red car there. That would have been me. But they didn't have much to work with. I was killed instantly. I mean, it was a horrific crash. I mean, both of my legs were crushed. I had brain damage as a result of having my head crushed. I was impaled on the steering wheel. This arm was in the back seat of the car. I was literally torn apart. And so they did everything they could, these paramedics, to try to resuscitate me, and they were unsuccessful, all 4 of them, really trying things they never even tried before. So I was declared dead, not by 1, but 4 paramedics, all experienced medical people. And I was covered up with a tarp, because the windows are gone out of the car, of course, and they didn't want anybody to see me. It was very gruesome. They're waiting for a coroner, because if you have a fatality like this, you have to have an investigation. Who's responsible for this death? Well, the truck driver was responsible for the death. They still have to have an investigation. Apparently, there were lots of other accidents around the county that day, because they had trouble getting the coroner out to that bridge, which means they couldn't move that car or the other wreckage until the investigation was over with. So it's a standstill. I had just left the pastor's conference just a few minutes before this, and behind me are a long line of other pastors who are trying to get to their churches to lead services all over Texas that night. Some of them have a long way to go. This is East Texas. It's 900 miles to the other side. So some of them aren't going to make it, obviously. But they're not going anywhere now. One of those pastors, a guy named Dick Honorecker, he and his wife left their car because everything stopped. No one's moving. They walked up the bridge. They saw this carnage, and they asked the policeman, one of those policemen standing there, if they could pray for the victims. Is there anyone I could pray for? And they were told there's no one to pray for. Everyone else is okay except the man in the red car there. He's dead. He's fatality. And when the policeman said that, God spoke to the preacher. At the retreat yesterday, we were talking about this. Don't you want a preacher that God speaks to? I think that's good. I think I want to be one. And I think God's doing a lot more speaking to all of us than we are listening. I think He did. Hopefully you'll be listening today, because I think He has something to say to each of you. Well, He was speaking to the preacher, and the preacher was told to pray for the man on the red car. That was what God said. Pray for the man on the red car. Well, he had never, in his theology, ever considered praying for a dead man. This was not part of his belief system. But he knew God was speaking to him, so he was obedient, which is, of course, what God is always interested in. If you only did things you understood, you wouldn't do very much. When you leave this building tonight and you get in your car and drive home, I suspect there are probably very few people in this room who understand hydraulic brake systems. But if you come to one of these stop signs or brakes, you're going to apply your brake if you don't want to be in an accident like me. You don't have to understand it. You just do it. You have faith that your car will stop. So if you're one of those people who says, if I don't see it, if I can't see it, I don't believe it. Well, you do things all the time. You can't see what you believe. It's just part of life, isn't it? Well, I'm dead on the bridge, and Dick Ron Ricker is told to pray for me. And finally, he gets permission to do so, and he crawls into the car. And that's what the car looked like in the wrecking yard. I apologize for the quality of the pictures. We seem to have misplaced the ones we had yesterday. But you could see how it clipped the car. The actual hatchback part of the car is knocked off. And over in the corner, this extreme corner, I apologize if I'm in your way, you can see the pathway of the truck as it ran right over the top. It was a horrible, horrific accident. And Dick gets into the back of the car, and he uncovers the tarp. He examines me, and he discovers, as a result of looking over the body, he has a medical background, that the only thing I didn't break was my right arm. It is the only thing I did not break in the accident. So he reaches between the seats where the body is, from the rear, and puts his hand on my right shoulder, because this is the only thing I didn't break. He begins to pray for me, because God's told him to. He was being obedient, even though he doesn't understand why. So he's praying now, and he's not the only one praying. A lot of people are praying. Soon. And the reason they're praying is because when they kind of searched me and found my identification, they called my home, south of Houston. Nobody was home that morning because my wife was teaching school. My wife taught school for 34 years. She is a retired elementary school teacher, Eva. She was at school that morning, and she is the hero of this story. I am not. I survived this eventually, but she overcame it. She had 3 children to take care of. She kept teaching so we could have some insurance to pay for the millions of dollars that this would cost. She is the one who emptied bedpans and balanced a checkbook. She's a hero. Eva has a book of her own coming out in July of this year. We have the front cover of it. The book is not available yet. Back on the book signing table. It's a book called A Walk Through the Dark. It's how do you overcome tragedy and loss as a caregiver. How do you get through it? Very excited about that book from Thomas Nelson. He was at school that morning, and so were our children. No one there answered the phone. So they called my church. They found my business card in the wallet. They called my church in Alvin and told the church I'd been in a bad accident, but not that I was dead, because my family has not been notified yet. I have to notify them first. So all the church knows is I've been in a terrible accident, and they did the only thing they could. They started praying. And they started calling other churches. One of the great things about having a service like this is that we can all do stuff together we could never do separately. And so they're calling every church in the community. Then they got the Houston phone book out, which represents about 6 million people. They started calling those churches, and it just spread over that area, and it would spread to neighboring states, and it certainly went through Pennsylvania, and it went coastal, and it went to foreign countries. In a very short period of time, many thousands of people are praying for the pastor who's been in a terrible wreck, because they don't know I'm already dead. The only person who knows I'm dead is in the car praying over the dead body, because God's told them to. This goes on for an hour and a half. The reason we know that is this accident, according to the police report, occurred at 11:45 a.m., right before noon. It is now 1:15 in the afternoon there on the Trinity River Bridge. Dick Honor is under the tarp praying over my dead body. He's singing a great old hymn like we just did, except the hymn he's singing is one called What a Friend We Have in Jesus. This is an awesome hymn. It's about 150 years old. He's singing that hymn holding on to my right shoulder under the tarp in the dark 90 minutes after I've been killed by the car wreck. And as he sings the song, without any warning, under that tarp in the dark, I started singing the song with him. He exited the car briskly. Wouldn't you? You may not have done this. He walked over to that policeman, whichever policeman it was, and said, "Officer, the dead man is singing." Nobody believed that, because it is unbelievable, isn't it? 4 paramedics, dead on the scene, and now I'm singing a hymn. So they have to figure out how to get me out of that car. I do remember singing, and that was very difficult. I was eventually removed, and I was taken to a series of hospitals, 3 of them. From an accident that happened at 11:45 in the morning, I finally arrived at a level 1 trauma center in Houston. Houston, Texas, Memorial Hermann Hospital at 6:15 that night. 6.5 hours later, and from that night forward, I would be in a hospital bed for 13 months. I would have 34 major operations to try to reassemble me from head to toe. So this story is really a story of answered prayer. It's a story of miracles. It's a story of finding a new way to live when you're not going to be the way you were before. And it's a story of heaven, because the moment, the exact second that the truck struck me, I was absent the body and present with the Lord. I went through a long, dark night to get through this, probably about 3.5 years before I regained full ability to walk. I was told I would never walk again. I lost my left leg. 4 inches of the femur was ejected out of the car, over the railing, into the water, and never found. My arm, which I pulled when the truck was coming for me, was dislocated at the shoulder. It went into the back seat, and from here forward was lying on the back seat of the car. They told me I would never walk, and if they were able to reattach this arm, I wouldn't be able to use it. It would just hang by my side. Well, I guess you noticed after the Paul introduced me, I did walk over here, and I assure you, these are my own 2 legs, and this is that arm. The reason for that is God's still in the miracle business today. He's doing some of his best stuff today. I know I have an answered prayer. All the people prayed, and God said, yes, I have nothing to do with my survival. I believe in prayer. Jesus said, if you ask it in my name, I will do it. They asked, and I'm here. Had I had a choice, I would have stayed there, not come back here. If you've been there, you don't want to be here. You're worried about some of the people that you've loved and lost for a little while. Well, if you're prepared to go, they're expecting you. They're not missing you. Are you ready? We're taking reservations today. Well, I went through a long, dark night, all those months in the hospital bed, and you can see in this right-hand photo up here on the screen that the steering wheel impaled me. I had massive internal injuries. My head was crushed by the collapsing roof. I had serious brain damage. Eva still thinks I have brain damage. I'm inclined to agree with her sometimes. And it's a good excuse sometimes, I must admit. I tell people before the accident I was a genius and this is all I got. Well, it was a long, dark night. We don't really have time tonight to talk about miracles because we're going to focus on heaven. But I had to have a lot of miracles happen for me to survive and to be functional at all. So I believe in miracles. And if you don't, I'm going to suggest that if God can resuscitate a dead man in a red car, he can help you overcome addiction. He can help you make peace with your past. He can put relationships back together again. He can help people overcome tragedies. One of my board of directors for Don Piper Ministries his house was 2,000 feet from all the homes that were destroyed in Granbury, Texas, just a couple of days ago. 2,000 feet. He said in his front yard were people's wedding pictures. And he was trying to gather them up so hopefully he could put them back to the people who lost everything. They need a miracle there. I've been to Joplin, Missouri. I've been to Connecticut after the school shootings. I was at Virginia Tech after all those kids were killed on the campus. Down in Louisiana after the hurricane. That's what we do. I think it's incumbent upon me to hold someone's hand and say, God is still in the miracle business. And here's your prayer. Well, I had to go through a lot of stuff to be here with you tonight. And suffice it to say, I believe in miracles. I believe in answered prayer. And I believe you can find a new normal, even if you're never going to be the way you were before. And I had to find a way to be, the way I was before. They ended up putting a device on me that looks like this. Since I lost 4 inches of femur, that's the thigh part of the leg, not the lower part of the leg, the calf part of the leg. But the device looks like this. I wore this thing for the first time. No one ever wore one before. The pneumonia was killing me. As you know, a lot of times people die of pneumonia after a catastrophic accident, not the accident itself. And I had pneumonia because I was in a prone position. So they tried this on me. I wore it for 11 months with 30 open wounds in my leg. They broke my leg in another place, and then they turned screws 4 times a day to try to stretch the bones inside to rejoin eventually. Took about a year. All the bones in this arm are actually from my left hip. They took the bones out of here and they put them in here. All the skin on this arm came from my right leg. Medical people have a wonderful knack for finding things you didn't hurt. Hurt that for you to fix the other stuff. So, the good news is I walked in here. When I finished, I'm walking out. I believe in miracles. And I believe even if you've been knocked down, you don't have to be knocked out. I had to find a new normal. I was never going to be the same as I was before. A lot of people get hung up on that. They get to that point when they lapse into what I call a pity party, and I had one of the worst ones ever. I found myself shaking my fist at God about 3 o'clock in the morning in the hospital bed where I lived all those years. And I wasn't so angry at him for what happened because I knew it was an accident. What I was upset about and frustrated with is nobody on earth knew what it was like to wear one of these things on their leg, feet. And I was asking God to send somebody here who understood. And the truth was there wasn't anyone else who understood. God said to me that morning there in the hospital room, 21st floor, St. Luke's Medical Tower in Houston, son, this is not about you. It's about what I can do through you now that I can never do before the big truck hits you. I want you to take this test and turn it into a testimony. I want you to take the mess and make a message that will bless someone else. I want you to find the disappointment in this and turn it into divine appointments with other people. I've been doing that ever since. I try to hold hands of people who are going through a long, dark night because I understand what that's like and tell them, I may be beaten up, but I'm not beaten and neither are you. God will help you. You may not be the way you were before, but you don't have to be bitter. You can be better. Let me help you. I understand how you feel. Together, we can get through this. That's how you get over it. Is allow God to help you help others get over it. I shared some verses with the folks at the retreat yesterday. I want to share them tonight before we go to heaven. They're found in 2 Corinthians 1, 3, and 4. Listen to these verses. Let them soak in, because this may be somebody in this room tonight who's recently lost a loved one, or maybe lost your house, or you're going through a financial catastrophe, or you've been abused and you've never really talked to anybody about it, or you went through a horrible relationship that just blew up in your face, or you know what I'm talking about. Listen to these words. 2 Corinthians 1:24. All praise to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. He is the source of every mercy and the God who comforts us. He comforts us in all of our troubles so that we can comfort others. When others are troubled, we will be able to give them the same comfort God has given us.